Hi, everyone. Mitch Jackson. Welcome to Wednesday Night Legal Marketing Live with my special guest this evening, Mr. Jay Baer. Jay, how are you this evening?
I'm pretty great, Mitch. Always good to see you, my friend Baer Down.
Baer Down, University of Arizona fellow alum, and we may not have a football season this year, Jay, but okay. I think fine. I've been saying that for about 40 or 50 years.
Does that mean we can't fire the coach if we don't have a season? Because if so, let's just play.
I'll tell you what, we'll talk about that once we go off the air. But listen, tonight the topic is how to rewire relationships and grow your business in a COVID-19 world. And I've got the guy here tonight, you guys, who's going to be helping us work our way. Real quick toast, my friend.
Oh, yeah.
Let's do a toast. You guys, it's 5 o'clock here, West Coast, 8 East Coast. There you go. That's to you. Who's going to help give us some ideas on what we need to do next for all the lawyers out there, all the professionals. Thanks for joining us. Share your comments, share your questions. We're monitoring this on all platforms. And look, I've got Jay Baer with us this evening. He's one of the world's most inspirational marketing, customer experience, and customer service Hall of Fame online and offline keynote speakers and presenters. He's a New York Times best-selling author of 6 books, a 7th-generation entrepreneur. That's crazy, Jay. Major respect to you and your family.
My son is an 8th-generation entrepreneur now. So
you know what? You and I both. And that's it'll be fun to see what they do with their careers. And he's also the founder of 5 multi-million-dollar companies. He has the Social Pros podcast. He's one heck of a barbecue lover, and from what I understand, a barbecue contest judge.
True.
And like we mentioned at the top of the hour, a fellow University of Arizona alum. Jay, welcome to the show. Let's dive right in. Recently, I watched you talk about how every business right now needs to think of itself as maybe a startup in this new COVID-19 environment. What the heck do you mean by that?
Well, it doesn't matter, Mitch, if you've been in business for 6 months or a year or 10 years or 4 decades. The connective tissue that you have or have enjoyed with your customers is gone now. It has evaporated because that connective tissue is based on pre-existing circumstances. It's based on trust, and it's based on sort of common wisdom about what it's like to work with you. But that's not true anymore. I'll give you an example. Think about Caesar's Palace, and I can say this with some authority because they're a former client of ours. Caesar's Palace Casino in Las Vegas went from the world's best known casino to 100% closed, to reopen with some guidelines, to this morning they just announced mandatory masks. Now that all happened in 3 weeks, right? And so what is your relationship with them now as a potential customer? It is completely reset to zero. Look at it this way. Think about if you're going to go make a purchase of any kind. You're going to acquire legal representation. You're going to find a dentist. You're going to get your hair cut. You're going to get some chicken wings or anything in between. And you're going to go look at reviews as one does. I wrote a book, Hug Your Haters, that largely dealt with online reviews and feedback. Any review that is out there before March 1st of 2020 counts for 0. Like, you're not going to pay attention to that review. That's not going to make any difference to you in your decision making. Anybody who worked there before may not work there now. How they do business may be different. What they charge may be different. And I read an amazing article, even since I was on Chris's show yesterday. McKinsey has new research out that says that more than 20% of all brand preferences on both the B2B and B2C side have shifted in the last 90 days. So this is terrible. Everything about this is terrible. However, this is also, and I mean this sincerely, the single greatest opportunity you will ever have in your entire professional life to change where you are in the sort of pecking order hierarchy of your competitors and go out and increase market share, and that may sound crass and craven, but I'm just telling you what the math says.
And I'll second that. That's what we've been preaching in the Legal Minds Mastermind, being proactive, taking advantage of what's happening right now to help people, to add value, right? To make a difference in people's lives, but at the same time to build your brand and be there next year and the year thereafter. You may not know this, but I started off my career working at Caesar's Tahoe.
Oh,
after
no
the
way. How about that?
I skipped graduation at the U of A. I'm a hustler.
Yeah.
Skipped graduation,
Let's
went
go.
right up to Tahoe and helped open up Caesars up there. I worked there for 2 years.
Also quit graduation. Started on a political campaign the next day.
Did you really?
Mm-hmm.
Interesting. Yeah, I didn't have time to stand around, and I wanted to get my career moving forward. Plus, there's something about Lake Tahoe, Jay.
Yeah, it doesn't suck. Yeah, it's good.
You know, that was
if you're gonna pick a Caesars property, that's the one I would pick for sure.
It was fun, but one thing about Caesars is they 2,000 employees, very well organized. Just the shift or pivot to wearing face masks, like you shared the announcement that came out this morning, that's huge.
Huge.
I mean, it's huge when you roll something out at that level, at that magnitude. The other issue we're seeing, at least for the trial lawyers in the group, you guys, I'll share your questions. I see them coming in, has to do with our client expectations. Whether we're sitting across from a prospective client at an initial consultation, or we're picking a jury in court. The things that you're talking about, that 20-year reputation, that 20-year brand, like you said, it's different today than it was this time last year. Talk to us a little bit about how we as professionals can tap into being proactive without also appearing to be opportunistic in the moment.
I think it's like you said, Mitch, it really is founded on utility, this idea that help beats hype, that helping and selling are just two letters apart, but those two letters make all the difference. And I wrote that book 10 years ago, or nearly 10 years ago now, 8 years ago at least. And it is more true and more valid today than it's ever been. This idea that if you just take what you know and give it away one bite at a time, that eventually that will come back around and lift you up and sort of send you on a new trajectory of success. You want to give away information snacks in order to sell knowledge meals. That's kind of the formula. Most people don't do it because it requires two things that are in short supply, Mitch. It requires patience, because it doesn't accrue benefits quickly. And it requires trust, because you have to trust that some percentage of the people that you have helped for free will eventually turn into revenue for you, whether it's directly or just via referral or some other way, that the rising tide will eventually lift you up. Patience and trust. And those who have patience and trust, as you do, and as you demonstrate every day here and in all the other great work that you do, people who are willing to play the long game and invest in a brand will succeed. I mean, that's the thing that's so interesting right now. You've got all of these businesses and all these industries, disrupted in a way that's, previously unthinkable. With some exceptions, most of the brands that are succeeding are those that actually have brands, right? That have invested in branding over the years. And it's really easy to not spend money on branding and utility and education and helpfulness when times are good. Because you think, well, why would I spend money on that? People are giving me money hand over fist. We're busier than we ever were. It's because you've made those investments when times are good, so that when times are bad, you're the one that survives. That's why it's called an investment in branding. That name is not an accident. And so now is here's the analogy, and you've heard this a million times, right? What's the best time to plant a tree? 30 years ago. What's the next best time to plant a tree? Today. And I feel the same way about education and helpfulness.
Adding helpful information, sharing helpful information with the consumer, answering their questions, especially for the lawyers in the group, Jay. It's a long-term play. And by the way, I heard your interview with Chris Brogan the other day, and you're talking about Chris's video, Overnight Success.
Yeah.
Right. Which I'm actually going to follow up on and do some of my own videos, because I've been doing this for 34 years. There's nothing overnight about anything that's in my life, right? It's a long-term play. But to follow up on what you just said, maybe share a little bit with the audience about the difference between being useful and amazing right now.
I don't know that we value amazing right now. And when you look at these numbers from McKinsey that show that so many brand preferences have shifted, and I am an example of that. So I'm not doing a lot of business, right now for obvious reasons. But personally, I've changed barbers and dentists and chiropractors and a bunch of other things just since the pandemic. And not because, I don't know, it's not like I sat down and said, let me pick new guys. It was just, I value different things now. Yeah. Like my wife, for example, used to be a member of a gym here in town. I am not a gym member, which may be perfectly clear by this video. And she changed gyms, not based on equipment, Mitch, not based on location, not based on price. She changed gyms based on perception of cleanliness. So how we make decisions, has totally been disrupted. And I don't know that we want to be amazed right now. What we want to be is certain. Uncertainty creates mental friction, and mental friction is what prevents people from becoming a customer or becoming your advocate or engaging any other kind of behavior that benefits you as an attorney or as a business person. And so right now it's not about shock and awe. It's about removing doubt, and removing doubt is 100% addressed by being useful and helpful. That is the only formula for that.
Look, when you said the only difference between helping and selling are two letters, okay? And I actually shared your quote earlier today at Social Media Day San Diego, just so you know. Gave you
I forgot that was today. How'd it go?
It was fantastic. We had a great panel. I think they've got a lot of good speakers, and there's nothing like being down in San Diego with your toes in the sand, right? But you do the best you can, and virtual is pretty awesome. So we had a good discussion, and I invite everyone to check out the Social Media Day San Diego website. But I did mention that today, Jay, because I think it's a small or narrow shift, but there's a big difference between adding value. When you and I were both starting off on social media, FOMO, fear of missing out, was huge, not only for you and I, but also for our audience and our clients. Everybody wanted the latest bell and whistle. And I think today, what we're looking at is just leave me alone. I've got a lot on my plate right now. Yeah. Don't waste my time. Be useful. Yeah. And so I'm glad you emphasize that, because the lawyers, the doctors, the dentists out there, the CPAs, think about sharing content that is useful to your online and offline audience. And I think you'll find things will dynamically change in engagement, in reach, in views, in podcast listens. And if you don't mind, Jay, just real quick, a lot of social media companies doing business in social media, they've seen their numbers go down, their podcast view listens, their live video views and things like that. But I have talked to a couple people who have said that when they write about COVID-19 mindset, leadership, issues with running a business, actually the numbers are going up because you're providing useful information.
Right. People have very specific questions, and if you can address those, they will come. And it's not surprising. Some of the shifts in viewing and listening, people's patterns are disrupted, right? I mean, podcasts in particular. I mean, podcasts are such a commuting or sort of what I used to call it is the ultimate multitasking medium, right? You can be on a treadmill and listen to a podcast, and you can use a snowblower. You don't know what that's like, Mitch, but trust me, you can use a snowblower and listen to a podcast, and you can do a lot of things listen to a podcast. And we're not doing those things anymore, right? We're not commuting. We're not, going to the gym as much. It's just, there's all the things that we used to do. I used to listen to a lot of podcasts on planes. Well, I'm not doing that either, right? So.
Yeah. I mean, I'm still listening to podcasts when I'm running. You see me with this bad boy right here.
Yep.
And just creating content, you guys, on the fly, which is super easy. I call it multitasking. But things are changing. But if you're creating content that's useful to the listener, to the viewer, to your audience, I think what I'm seeing is a lot of experts are saying that content is still being digested. It's still being watched. It's still being shared. Let's talk about.
Does anybody have? I mean, raise your hand if you've got all the answers on how to get through COVID, or even what COVID is, or even where we're at in the midst of the COVID pandemic, right? So to say, like, I've heard this on other shows, and people say, well, is it time to stop talking about COVID? Do we need to move on topically to something else because people are tired of hearing about it? I'm like, I don't think anybody's tired of hearing about it until we actually have some answers, both as individuals on the planet and as business people, and nobody has that yet. So I don't think anybody's tired of it yet, as long as the content's good, obviously.
As long as the content's good, and for example, if you're proactive, it gives you a chance to pivot a little bit. For example, I've noticed that you've shared a couple of shows about virtual presentations, about different techniques to do what you do so well from stage online. Okay, instead of sitting around and not doing anything else at all, you've been proactive. You've embraced the moment and wrapped your arms around it and owned it. And I think that's huge as a business owner. It's huge as a professional.
Yeah, we have, I think, six or seven virtual speeches in June. So it's busy in that regard. It's nice that I've been doing that kind of work for a long time. So that shift was not particularly difficult. But yeah, we've got another webinar. Myself and Brian Fans are doing it together on July 30th on that topic on how to go beyond the webinar. And then we have one on July 14th with Ann Handley about how to use market research to create thought leadership during the pandemic.
I would love to share those links with my audience, Jay. So if you have a chance, if you could have your team send those links over, it would be my pleasure. Two superstars, three, including you. Let's pivot just a little bit about sharing our message with our offline and online communities. Let's talk about talk triggers. You point out in your book, Talk Triggers, that word of mouth is directly responsible for about 19% of all purchases and influences as much as 90% of our purchases. At the same time, fewer than 1% of companies have an actual strategy for generating these conversations. Can you talk to us a little bit about how we can develop talk triggers, especially in today's COVID-19 world?
Well, the reason why nobody has a word of mouth strategy, Mitch, is because we just take it for granted. We believe, and this is universally true, including myself until we wrote the book. We just believe that if we run a good business or we're a good attorney, that people will naturally notice that and talk about it. But that's not actually the way people behave. The big insight in that book is that competency doesn't create conversations. I have never said to anybody, Mitch, let me tell you about this experience I just had. It was perfectly adequate. Like, nobody ever says that, because that's not how word of mouth works. There's no story there. There's no surprise. There's no twist. So nobody's going to say, oh, I had such a great experience with Mitch, because you just did the thing they paid you to do.
Exactly. Right.
The guy was just here today mowing the grass. And it's mowed. I can look out the window right now. It's definitely mowed. But that's not a story. I'm not going to spread the word, because the thing I paid him to do was actually executed. So if you want to turn your customers into volunteer marketers, and you do, you've got to give them a story to tell. And that story is not typically what you actually provide. It's not your core product or service. It's something else. It's a little twist, right? It's a little extra thing that is purposefully designed to create conversations. And a talk trigger, we define it in the book as an operational choice that is designed to create conversations. So it's something that you do on purpose so that people will notice it and then tell that story.
I want to, before we dive into maybe some suggestions on how we can create
plaid suits, for example.
I love your plaid suits. And is that a flower on your lapel?
Yeah, always a flower.
Always a flower. Okay, I did not know that. I want to just thank Chris Strubb, Nicole Abood, and everyone else for sharing this out on Twitter. You guys, we're broadcasting on Periscope, YouTube, Facebook, LinkedIn, over on every platform you can think of. And so thank you guys. And we also appreciate your questions and comments, and I will try to get to them if we can. So encouraging, let me take a step back. Creating talk triggers, things that our happy customers or clients want to talk about, maybe our employees, our team want to talk about. What are the 4 elements for creating an effective talk triggers, Jay? And have any of those elements changed in this coronavirus world?
No, to answer the second part of the question, it's the same formula. How you structure it might be a little different, only because your operations may be affected tremendously,
which is a big deal.
Yeah. So I think about a restaurant like Skip's Kitchen, which is one of the classic examples in the book. It's a counter service restaurant in Sacramento. You go to the front counter and you say, I want patty melts and I want a chocolate shake. And then after you've ordered, but before you pay, they have a deck of playing cards and they fan them out. They say, pick a card, right? And if you get a joker, your entire meal is free. That's their talk trigger. It's incredibly successful. They've been doing it for years. They never spend any money on advertising. There's a line to get in every day. I don't know that they can do that right now because I think it's still takeout only, right? So right. I haven't talked to Skip. I should check in with him and see how it's going. So some of those things, the deployment of your talk trigger may have to change in COVID, but the formula is the same. And there's 4 things that must be true. First, it's got to be remarkable in the true definition of that word, worthy of remark. It's what Seth Godin talked about so powerfully in The Purple Cow. Second, it needs to be repeatable, which means that it happens all the time, not every once in a while. One of the tendencies that people have, especially marketers, when they're thinking, oh, we should try and create some conversation, is they say, well, what we should do is something special for our biggest customers or our newest customers, or maybe our longest standing customers. That sounds good on paper, but remember, the point of a talk trigger is to maximize conversations. And if you truncate the number of people who experience the talk trigger, you are by definition massively undercutting the number of people who experience it, therefore the number of people who can talk about it. So your talk trigger, just like it Skips, everybody who goes to Skips gets to play that card game. Everybody. It's not just on Wednesdays. It's not just at lunch. It's not just on your birthday. It's not just on ladies' night. Like every customer, every time, because you want more people to know the story. Repeatable. Third is you want it to be reasonable. One of the things we do in marketing all the time is we say, okay, guys, we need to get some chatter. We need to get some conversation around this Mitch and Jay live stream. So we're going to have a contest, and we're going to have everybody who leaves a comment in the chat is entered to win, and one of you is going to win a Caribbean island, right? And people are like, wait, what? Like, what are you talking about? So it turns out, courtesy of Mitch Jackson. It turns out, Mitch, and I think there's a lot of applicability here for law and especially jury work. It turns out that when you create an experience for a customer that is too grand, right? It actually doesn't create conversation. Seems like it would, right? It actually creates suspicion, which stops conversation. The example I like to use is, remember the Publishers Clearinghouse sweepstakes? I guess maybe it still exists. I don't know.
I do. I used to enter it when I was a kid.
Yeah, sure. Who didn't, right? $10 million just for buying some magazines. Well, the prize was so big, especially in those days, $10 million, that they actually had to buy tons of really expensive TV commercials where they would show the Publishers Clearinghouse SWAT team go to somebody's house with a giant check and balloons to try to convince you that the whole thing was not bullshit.
I remember those ads.
In my estimation, they would have been better off having the prize be $1 million, and everybody be like, yeah, that makes sense. They have $1 million. Then they wouldn't have had to buy any TV at all, right? So you don't want to overshoot it. Your talk trigger doesn't have to be big. It just has to be interesting. And the quintessential example is the cookie at DoubleTree hotels.
Yes.
Chocolate chip cookie. Every time you check in, every guest, every day, 30 years they've been doing it. They don't do any advertising. They almost never advertise a global hotel chain because the cookie is the ad and the guests are the marketing department, right? That's what and they're not giving away an island. It's a chocolate chip cookie. It's a good cookie, still just a cookie, right? So reasonable is the third one. And the last one is relevant. It has to make sense in the context of who you are and what you're about, right? This isn't just like, hey, you know what we should do? let's rent an elephant and we'll park it outside the courthouse. Like, you could do that and you would get conversation, but the conversation would be very short term. And people would be like, what? I don't like, why is there an elephant? It doesn't add up. Right. So you might think, well, Jay, you just talked about DoubleTree. Why does this hotel give out a chocolate chip cookie? It's not Nestle Toll House Hotel. You're right. But according to their CMO, DoubleTree's brand positioning is the warm welcome. That's their shtick across the entirety of the Hilton portfolio. There's like 20 Hilton brands. So they want to be disproportionately good at the, 7 minutes between when you set foot in the hotel and when you set foot in your room. So better lobby design, better front desk clerk training, and the cookie ceremony, and it is a ceremony, is a big part of that. So warm welcome, warm cookie. That's how it adds together. So a talk trigger is not going viral. It's not a campaign, and it's not random. It is a strategic, never ceasing framework designed to create conversations about you and your business forever.
And it just makes sense. I mean, the examples that you gave make sense. And I want you, I don't want to put you on the spot, Jay, but I want to give you a second while I welcome some people to the show. AJ Richmond, who's a very gifted trial lawyer out of Georgia. What's an example for a lawyer regarding talk triggers? And once again, talk triggers, you guys, number 1, remarkable. Number 2, relevant. Number 3, reasonable. Number 4, repeatable. And Jay, maybe while you're thinking about an answer, and I'm sure you've already got one, I read talk triggers and thought to myself, how can I create talk triggers for my jury at the end of a 2-week trial when they go back into a deliberation room? And you guys, if you've never been in a jury trial, we're done talking to them. It's done. Once they go back there, you're not in control of what they talk about. You're not in, well, I think you are using talk triggers, but it's gone. It's out of your hands. And so in positioning or coming up with an answer, jury voir dire and jury deliberation is important. But I wanted to say hi to, let me see if I can make this work. We got Chris is here. Hey, Chris, good to see you. We've got Rebecca who's here, who's going to be a guest on the show.
Hey. Good to see her.
It's great to see her. We got Karima, who's here, who's a gifted lawyer here in Orange County, California, also an aeronautical engineer, Jay. Very, very amazing. A lawyer, yes, a patent lawyer.
First lawyer in space. That's what we need. Yeah,
it's exactly what we need. And she's a friend of ours. We've got Nancy's here, and Joanne, and everyone else. We got really one other friend of mine up here. We got Mo Lilenthal's joining us. Neil from New York's joining us, and everyone else in the group. But let's get back to AJ's question about lawyers. How can lawyers use talk triggers either in court or out of court?
I don't know, but I'll tell you how to find out, because I'll tell you what the worst way is to figure out a talk trigger is to brainstorm it. If it was that easy, AJ, you'd already have one. So the important thing to remember is talk triggers are always about expectations. It has to be something that your client's jury pool doesn't necessarily see coming. And the way you come up with that is the way we do it, the system that we use in my consulting firm, which is the same system we wrote about in the book, is we actually do several pieces of research. So first, we look for any existing chatter, right? So we look at customer emails, we look at ratings and reviews, we look at any phone call transcripts, any customer feedback that we can get our hands on to say, all right, what's the party line now, if any, right? In some cases, there isn't anything, but sometimes there is. That's the first thing. Then we do 3 sets of interviews. So we usually do these one-on-ones. It's better to be qualitative than quantitative. And we will interview, when we do the full process, it's usually 6 of each of these. So it's 18 one-on-one interviews. Your mileage may vary. We interview 6 brand new customers or clients, so relatively new, 6 long-term or repeat, and maybe you don't want as many repeat clients in the trial lawyer business, but I'm sure that happens. And you want 6 lapsed or unhappy clients. And what you want to do in these conversations is walk them through the customer journey So how did you first hear about us? And then what happened? And then what happened? And then what happened? And then what happened? When we sent you an invoice, how did that work? And then when you had a question, how did that work? When we had the first meeting, how did that work? And you just ask little leading questions and then just shut up and let them talk. Because what you're trying to create, Mitch and AJ, is a customer journey map, right? And you overlay on top of that a customer expectations map. Once you know what your clients expect at each step of the customer journey, you by definition also know what they do not expect. And a talk trigger always has to live in the place they don't expect. So I'll give you an example from my world, which is most similar. A big part of the customer journey in the professional services business, marketing services, is that we will send our potential clients a proposal. A detailed proposal of the services that we aim to provide, how that will work, timeline, cost, our qualifications. People know what a proposal is. In almost every case, the way proposals work now in 2020 is a firm like mine will create a proposal. They will save it as a PDF file, and that proposal will be emailed to the prospective client with a follow-up telephone call or a Zoom call.
And when you say your firm, are you talking about Convince and Convert, or is this?
Yep.
Okay. All right. Sorry.
We don't really say agency because we're not an agency. We typically say firm because we're really more of a consulting strategy outfit. So that's how proposals work, right? Well, people expect that, obviously, because that's how it's always done. What if instead, Mitch, AJ, what if instead, when you had a proposal, you printed it out, and you put it in a plastic envelope, which do exist. And then you went to your local Kroger or Ralph's or H-E-B or whatever the major grocer is in your location, and you went to the bakery and you said, hey, here's the proposal. I want you to decorate this cake so it looks like the cover of this proposal. But then I want you to take this proposal that's in a plastic envelope and I want you to put it underneath the cake. And then you had the cake, an actual sheet cake, delivered to your prospective client with your proposal underneath it, so that in order to access your proposal, your prospective client had to eat at least half of a cake. Would that create conversations? Would that be something that they would not expect?
Wow.
It would.
Unbelievable.
Indeed.
Unbelievable.
Right?
Jay.
It's not easy, right? You just have to, it doesn't have to be big. It just has to be something different. There's a tire guy who runs a tire changing, he's a tire retailer, one outlet in Kansas. He also makes homemade root beer. That's his hobby. Makes homemade root beer. He's a root beer guy. Every time somebody brings their tires in or their car in, new tires, rotation, balance, tire stuff, they get a 2-liter bottle of root beer in the passenger seat with a handwritten note. He is known as the root beer tire man in the entire state of Kansas.
Unbelievable. Jay, this is incredible. This is, do I recall Talk Triggers correctly, where you actually did go into the creation process?
Yeah, there's 6-step process.
The 6-step process. Okay. And so for those of you that are interested in trying to figure this out on your own, and good luck with that. That's like asking Jay to try a case for one of my clients. That's not what he does for a living, although I'm glad you're not a trial lawyer, Jay, because I would not want to be up against you. Your ability, that's why you're a Hall of Fame speaker, okay? But having said that, I encourage everyone, if you guys are serious about creating talk triggers, the type of talk triggers that Jay just mentioned, reach out to him at Convince and Convert and work with his team to develop effective and persuasive talk triggers that are going to work for you today. With everything going on in the world, or get his book and try to figure it out on your own. Yeah,
you can. That's kind of you to say, Mitch, but you definitely can figure it out on your own. That's what and the book is the exact same system that we use every day. We didn't write it to create consulting contracts. We wrote it because it's stupid that nobody actually pays attention to this. Word of mouth is the single most important way to grow your business, period. And nobody spends more than 10 seconds thinking about it every year. So that's why we wrote the book. You definitely can do it on your own. I'd be happy to help you, obviously, but you definitely can do it on your own. But don't just sit in a room with 4 beers and brainstorm it, because it won't turn out well. Also, important note, this is in the process in the book. And go to talktriggers.com, by the way, because not only can you get information about the book, self-evident, but there's tons of free resources on the website. There's research, there's presentations, there's videos, there's infographics, like a lot of free stuff there. So even if you don't want to buy the book, you can probably get as far as you need to go just for free on the website. Hopefully my publisher is not watching. But make sure that when you come up with something, you test it. Don't just roll this out. So what you want to do is you say, okay, I have an idea for a talk trigger. We just rolled one out recently for a national chain of arborists. They're a tree care company and really interesting brand. And so we did the whole process and we think this is the right talk trigger for you. But we took certain markets, right? And we're rolling the talk trigger out in those markets only, and then measuring the downstream talkability of that idea before we launch it national, right? And the same thing can happen in a small local business. Instead of giving it to every customer, as I asked you to do, you give it to every nth customer, and then you see whether they remember it and mention it, right? And if they do, then you're like, okay, now we got gold in the river. Now you roll it out to everybody. So don't just do it. Test it first, because I've been doing this a long time. I wrote a whole book about it, and sometimes I'm wrong. Like sometimes you think you know what will work, and it just doesn't work.
That's why I was wondering if things have changed over the last 2 or 3 months, how we're communicating, how effective our message is with all the noise out there right now. Before we went live, I was telling you, I'm completely exhausted right now, and I was glad to see Jay actually have a nice cold beverage with him to complement mine, right? To help me get through the day. But listen, I don't actually think creating talk triggers, I read your book, Jay, and I am one of those guys that does things myself. And you just mentioned, interviewing 3 sets of 6, that's 18 interviews, in an ideal world. I don't have time to do that. My friends that are trial lawyers don't have time to do that. And then once they do that, what do you do with the content? What do you do with the results? It's more involved, you guys, than what Jay is suggesting. I'm just going to say, if you want to go about the right way, then get a professional, in your corner. If you want to win your case, get a good trial lawyer in your corner. Otherwise, you're just rolling the dice. So Jay, we're doing everything that you're suggesting. We're approaching the new COVID-19 relationships with these thoughts in mind. But guess what happens? All of a sudden, we get somebody that's engaging or commenting on a post, on a video that we've shared, who's mad at us, who's calling us out, who's saying unkind things about us. There's a lot of stress and tension in the world today. There's a lot of people that are having some serious lifelong challenges and problems, right? How do you suggest that we deal with, and you wrote a book, Hug Your Haters. It's a great book, you guys. Check it out. I've suggested it more than once in the mastermind. But in today's COVID-19 world, where there's just a lot more weight on everyone's shoulders, talk to us a little bit about how we can hug our haters. What are some things we need to pay particular attention to today, and help keep us out of trouble?
I just want to make sure I'm clear on this, Mitch. What you're telling me is that there are circumstances in which people are unhappy with trial lawyers?
There's a rumor out there floating around.
Make sure that I've got this straight.
It's just something that every once in a while it pops up on my social media feeds, Jay. I don't know what to say.
Got it. Fair enough. Look, the Hug Your Hater system, like the talk trigger system, has lots of pieces and parts to it, and it's built as a system. But let me summarize it neatly for this evening's audience.
Thank you.
First, you got to answer everybody. Okay. Running and hiding makes it worse, not better. We did tons of research in that book and discovered that when you answer a customer or a client or a complainant or anybody else, when you answer somebody, it increases their advocacy by as much as 50%. When you ignore them, it further decreases their advocacy by as much as 25%. So it literally doesn't matter whether or not you can fix it. It just matters that you say, I heard it. Second, out of every 100 dissatisfied clients, now you have never had 100 dissatisfied clients, Mitch Jackson, but let's just say you did. Out of every 100 dissatisfied clients, only 5 will actually complain. The other 95 just talk shit about you behind your back. And those 95 is what ruins businesses. It's not the 5. We pay all of our attention to the 5 because we can see them, because they raise their hand, because they go on record. But look at it another way. The people who take the time to complain, the people who take the time to leave you a snarky comment on YouTube, the people who take the time to say, I didn't like this Instagram post, the people who take the time to express negativity or concern in any form or fashion, those people are quite literally using their time to tell you that in their estimation, you could be better. And that is a gift, not a curse. Your least happy clients are, by definition, your most important clients, but we do not treat them that way. We treat them as a sunk cost. We say, this person is unhappy. Well, we'll move on to the next one. That person's an outlier in some way, or we'll just replace them with a happier client or a better fit or whatever the circumstances are. But one thing I've learned studying this for many, many years, Mitch, is usually, not always, there are some definite crazies out there, but usually where there's smoke, there's fire. When you're really honest with yourself and somebody says, I didn't like this, there's almost always a kernel of truth in it somewhere. And that can be very, very useful. Third thing I would say is speed is really important, right? Especially now. The longer you wait to respond, the more the uncertainty builds, and uncertainty is already at an all-time high. So being nimble and quick is very much a valuable commodity. And the fourth and most important thing I'll say on this, Mitch, is that we are living in a time, and even, it was a few years ago when I wrote that book, 4 maybe, even then, what I said in that book was empathy will set you free. You don't really know anybody's deal. Like, you don't know. They could be having the worst day of their life, and they just decided to let off some steam by complaining about your YouTube video or calling you or whatever the circumstances are. You don't, especially right now, you don't know what the actual deal is with them. So you better tread carefully, number one. And also empathy, and I've talked about empathy now a lot in the last 2 books. Empathy wouldn't even been in a book that I wrote 6 or 7 years ago. Why? Because treating one another with empathy and kindness and compassion and concern didn't used to merit note. That was just what we called business and life. That was the default setting. And it sure isn't the default setting now. We are living, and I think you'll agree, I know you'll agree, Mitch, we're living in an era of empathy deficit, where in business and life, in politics, in all corners, treating one another with kindness and respect and compassion and dignity and humanity is no longer the default setting. And that makes me really, really sad as a person. But I will tell you, the flip side is it gives you a tremendous opportunity to differentiate with empathy. So if somebody comes at you, all you got to say is, man, that really sucks. I'm sorry. I'll try and do better. And just walk away, man. Don't overcomplicate it. You don't have to look. And I know it's hard for attorneys because you are literally trained to argue it out. But the worst thing you can do is to try and argue it out, especially online. You won't win. It's not a courtroom. Twitter is not a jury, right? So the best thing you can do is follow the now legendary Baer rule of reply only twice. You get a conversation with somebody, doesn't matter where, why, what, about what, Facebook, Trump, masks, don't care. Anything in your life. This has been so liberating for me since I wrote this principle down. You reply only twice. You argue about it. You argue about it a second time. If they want to come back a third time, peace out. Move on with your life, because you're not going to win that argument. At that point, they are demonstrated that they're more interested in arguing than listening. And tell me the tale. Anybody who's watching, tell me the story when you got into it online with somebody and you went back and forth, and at the end they're like, "You're right," or that it ended amicably and peaceably. 0% chance.
It doesn't happen. And I'm glad you brought up that 2 communication principle, guideline, or rule, because it works. Look, oftentimes the reason I became a lawyer is to take on the bad guys, and I'm passionate about certain things. And just because I'm a lawyer doesn't mean those passions have changed. So if you guys follow me on social, you know where I stand on all the social issues. And I'm 10Xing it right now. It does not matter to me at this point in my life. That's how I feel. Having said all that, I do try to be tough on issues and kind to people, as Bob Berg would say. And I don't let these things become personal. Having said that, 2 touches, like you just suggested, Jay, and I'm done. I almost feel like I'm sharing facts with the general community as opposed to trying to win a particular battle. And there's a difference there. There's something else that I do, Jay, online. I'm not a social media expert. I don't know if it's the right or wrong thing to do, but it works for me. And guess what it is? It's unfollow and block.
Yeah.
I don't really care. I don't need to let these people into my life.
I know.
What are your thoughts about that?
I could do a whole show on this.
I mean,
I know exactly what you mean, and I've unfollowed way more people in the last 90 days than I have in my whole life combined. And I feel it, and and I know exactly what you're saying, Mitch. You can't fix stupid. But I will say this with respect. Truncating your field of view purposefully is partially how we got in this mess. I wrote a blog post 11 years ago. I'll try and find it. I'll send it to you. You'll like it. 11 years ago, which said it was really at the first kind of real beginning of the huge strength of cable news and kind of vertical online communities that were topically oriented and politically oriented. And what I said was this balkanization of news sources will be the ruin of everything. Because once you can curate your own news and your own beliefs and your own Facebook groups so that you're only surrounded by people who think whatever you think, regardless of what that is, that it robs you of the necessity to even accept that there is an alternate perspective. And 11 years later, I've been sadly, I think, proven correct on that prediction. And so I completely agree that it brings your own pot off boil when you sort of prune the bonsai tree of your own relationships. But I feel like on the whole, it also has some negative effects as well, because then you're doing the same thing that we accuse others of, which is not keeping their eyes open.
Yeah, I agree 100%. You know, it's interesting, the training, my wife's an attorney and our daughter's a lawyer, and we'll sit around at dinner and we'll talk about things. And one of the things lawyers are trained to doing is looking at both sides of an argument, both sides of a situation. I get that. And I think what I was alluding to, Jay, where people are making racist comments, or people are just using profanity and just things that aren't appropriate under any circumstance, regardless of which side of the fence you're on. And what I was trying to tell some friends of mine that are lawyers, high-profile lawyers that get a lot of incoming comments and engagement, is there is power in muting, deleting, unfollowing, and blocking. And if these people wouldn't make it into your office, normal appointment, sit across from your desk, because you don't want to have anything to do with someone like that, why do you feel the need to have to include them in your social media life? I would take the position that you don't. I just don't give a shit. I don't give a shit. I mean, a client
or a customer, different story.
It is.
Some guy, then I'm like, take a walk.
Yeah, if it's a client, then you obviously want to treat that different than if it's a complete stranger. Here's another thought, Jay, which I know you'll get a kick out of, is there are certain people who I won't agree to represent as a client.
Sure.
Because of what I've seen on social media. And whatever, it just is what it is. But I'm telling you guys, for every no that you share with someone, it opens you up for 10 yeses. It introduces you to a community of people who share, hopefully, righteous, legitimate positions on important issues in your life.
More than ever, like we talked about, changing brand selections. Like, people aren't going to vote. I mean, yes, obviously, because of unemployment rate and colossal economic collapse, certainly price is an issue. But let's just set that aside. When you take price out of all the other things that you can make decisions about, values and what you stand for has now ratcheted to the top of the list, right? I mean, way more than ever. And you see big brands playing that card too. So I think you should have the confidence to stand for something and be the best choice for people who stand for something similar, as opposed to being a choice for everybody. Because if you're a choice for everybody, you'll never be the best choice for anybody.
For those viewers tonight, Jay, who have watched the show and they want to be your choice. They want to connect with you. They want to see what you're doing. Hopefully reach out, develop some talk triggers, get some consulting services. What's the best way for them to reach out and stay connected with you?
Well, I'm pretty easy to find. It's Jay Baer, all the places. The best place to find us as an organization is convinceandconvert.com. We have more than 3,000 articles of free advice for attorneys, business owners, managers. We have hundreds and hundreds of podcasts, research, webinars, all the stuff that you could ever want. And we would be delighted to help you. We've got strategists literally from coast to coast.
Highly recommend Jay Baer, you guys. And Jay, real quick, your Social Pros podcast, isn't it? It's one of the most highly rated Apple podcasts, correct?
Yeah, it's top 15 marketing shows of all time, cumulative downloads on Apple. We're almost at episode 450.
Wow.
Mr. Jackson has been a guest on the program, exceptional guest as always. And we've had a really great run lately. Adrian Parker, who's the CMO of Patron, was on last week, and this week is Laurie Meacham, who runs social media customer service for JetBlue. Talk about an interesting job today. Running social media customer service for an airline right now is interesting. So we've had a really great run of guests on that show. And I have two other podcasts that I produce. One is called Standing Ovation, which is all about storytelling amongst speakers. And I have a brand new show that hasn't even debuted yet, Mitch, that I don't even think you know about, called Bold Creators, that I'm launching with the guys at Wix, the web platform company out of Israel. And Bold Creators is a story where I interview founders of very prominent web design firms all around the world about their journey from being a little web design startup to where they are today. It's really, really fun. Some incredible stories. I come from that world. I owned a web design company at one point, and 0% of successful web design companies have been linearly successful. It is a roller coaster ride for everybody. So it's a fun show to do. And that'll be, I think, July 9th is the debut of that show, I think. Bold Creators.
Well, I'll be subscribing. I'll be watching. I'll be listening. I'll be following everything you do, Jay. I'm a big fan, and so is my community. Thank you very much, sir, for being on this evening. Thank you very much for sharing your wisdom. And everyone out there, connect with Jay Baer and make each day your masterpiece. Good night, everyone. Take care.
Take care.
Bye-bye.